All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today for our session on ensuring balance in an assessment system. My name is Matt Ball. I'm our Vice President of Business Development within Cognia in our Improvement Services Division. I started my educational career as a high school ELA English teacher and moved outside the classroom to start working for a number of different not for profit educational companies, mainly in the realm of assessment, which is why I'm really happy to bring this topic to you all today and really excited for you all to be here. I'm joined by my two colleagues, Jamie Brockmeyer and Jim Mirabelli. I'm going to go ahead and have them introduce themselves first, and then we'll get to our agenda and on to our session for today. So, Jim, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Thank you, Matt. Hi, everyone. My name is Jim Mirabelli. My work journey started off as a math teacher, taught math for 10 years. And then I spent some time with the Indiana Department of Education, was there for about 8 years, where my primary role was working on the state math assessments. And then after that, I have been working with two nonprofit education companies. And again, my primary role has been with math assessments. Great to be with you today. I'll pass it to Jamie.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie Brockmeyer. And like Matt and Jim, my journey in education began as a teacher, as a classroom teacher in elementary. And I've worked in the classroom space and in the teacher education space. And through that work, have really realized the importance of curriculum and assessment for improving student achievement. And that's what brought me over to this side. So I've worked in curriculum and assessment, and I'm hoping to bring some of those ideas to you today to help you improve your systems. So we'll go back to Matt.
Thank you, Jamie. Really appreciate that. So, as I mentioned, we'll be going over our agenda real quick here to kind of outline what we'll be talking about today. Excuse me. We'll be spending a very brief amount of time on Cognia's network, so we all kind of have an idea of who Cognia is, where we've been, and most importantly, some of the data points and insights that we've collected that have brought us to today's conversation. We'll then move into the bulk of our conversation with Jim and Jamie on a balanced assessment system, and most importantly, our assessment audit tool that they've put together and we'll be working through with all of you throughout today's session. So a little bit about Cognia and our network. We currently work with over 40,000 institutions, 800,000 educators, and over 16 million learners across 90 countries or territories. This makes us the largest school improvement organization in the world, having worked for the last 130 years with quite a rich history. Throughout that history, we've helped schools in a number of different components within our continuous improvement model, beginning with observe, evaluate, learn, and improve. And through that work, really, I want to start with observations. We do this in a number of different ways, beginning with instructional practice. So really making sure that we're providing tools to teachers that help them evaluate their own instruction and improve their pedagogy for students. Then we also have our student observation tool, which we really use to identify and evaluate what is happening within the classrooms relative to the learning environments for students. We feel that these are truly the building blocks of student achievement and school performance, and are vital to moving into our next phase, which is evaluation. Before we move into that evaluation phase, though, I want to spend just a quick moment to talk about some of the data that we have collected. And so looking at observations from the field, you can see here since 2018, we have almost 1 million data points on student engagement observations. We also have over 20 million stakeholder surveys from parents, teachers, administrators, students, all of which we use into our evaluation phase. Most of you who are joining us today are probably part of Cognia's network and know us very well for our accreditation reviews. That is what we use a lot of this observation data for throughout that evaluation process. We also use this observation data as part of our root cause analyses or our diagnostic reviews. And finally, another component of our evaluation phase are our student assessments. While we won't be spending time talking about the specific assessments that Cognia offers, you can certainly learn a lot more on our website. But again, today's conversation is going to focus on a balanced assessment system, which brings me to our next slide here on some of the data that we've collected throughout that evaluation process. And so you can see here over the last 2.5 years, there are some key improvement priorities that are leading a lot of our schools' improvement efforts, one of which is Standard 30, all about assessing learners' progress using a balanced assessment system that includes both assessments for and of learning. And again, all this data is integral to the types of resources, tools, and topics of conversation that we bring to our members each and every year. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague, Jim Mirabelli, who's going to kick us off with some reflection around assessment. Jim?
Thank you, Matt. Okay, we have 2 questions for you to think about. And for these questions, just do some quick individual thinking. I'm only going to give about 20 seconds for each question. So first, think about an assessment experience that you found useful. What was it that made it valuable? Go ahead with some think time now. Okay, now thinking about that value, was the value linked to the purpose of the assessment? In other words, when you think about what made the assessment valuable, did that fulfill its purpose or maybe at least partially fulfill it? Let me give you a quick example. My wife and I recently took a temperament quiz, and the value that we got from it was, one, it gave us a deeper understanding of our temperament types, but 2, it gave us a deeper understanding and appreciation of each other. Now, when you looked at what the purpose of the assessment was, it was to, 1, help determine your temperament type, and it certainly did that, but 2, it was also going to suggest some traits that you might possess based on that temperament type. It certainly did that as well. But anyway, what I'd like you to do now is take a moment to quietly reflect on your own experience. So again, was the value that you found in the assessment linked to the purpose of the assessment? Okay, I'm going to move us forward here. I'd like to point out just a couple of things before moving on. One, though, it's critical, right? And we all know this, that assessments, they have to fulfill their purpose. And when we think about assessment design, that's really the starting place, defining the purpose of the assessment. And then hopefully, by fulfilling its purpose, there's great value that comes from it. Okay. Keeping in line with this idea of purpose of assessments, we know that there are different types of assessments with different purposes. And what we want to think about now is how those different assessment types can really work together to create a balanced assessment system. So what you're looking at here on the screen is an abridged version of our balanced assessment system model. So I'll take a few minutes now to kind of walk through it. Maybe first you'll notice that, right, there are kind of 3 buckets, right? You see formative, interim, and summative. Those are the 3 primary assessment types. And right above it, then you can think of it as sort of the timeline, right? Beginning of school year to the end of school year. So let's start then over there on the left with formative assessment. The first thing I would say to notice is just the symbols that we've used to indicate. You can see there there's white curvy arrows. And when you look at the timeline, you see that they really kind of, I like to think of it as weaving in and out throughout the year from the beginning until the end. Hopefully that's kind of what you think of when you think about formative assessments. And you can kind of see in the bottom left, right, some examples that we've identified, things like exit tickets and screeners and quizzes, cooperative learning activities. When I was a math teacher, my favorite formative assessment was I had marker boards where on one side of the marker board, it was blank. The other side, it had a coordinate plane. And so I could pose all sorts of different math questions, and I could have students working out the problems on their marker boards, showing their answers and their work and all. And then I can get a very quick gauge of how my students are doing. It's great too, because it allows you to quickly identify students that you might need to give some extra support to. Maybe you want to group students, have students help other students out, that kind of thing. Anyway, right in the middle then there, you should see kind of talks about the purpose of formative assessments. And really the primary purpose is for teachers and students just to see how learning is coming along. And this is a big and, right? We know then that, it's thinking about what are the next steps based on what I'm seeing from these formative assessments. Okay, we'll move to the middle of this model now where we see interims. And our interims there are symbolized with the red dot. And when you look at the timeline then, you can see three red dots there kind of equally spaced out. We like to think of the interims, kind of occurring anywhere from 2 to 4 times throughout the year. And by the way, if you're thinking about I'm wondering where the benchmarks fit in here, we would lump benchmarks really into this interim bucket. But you can see then down below that these are really school or district-wide interims. And then I like to think of them always as serving 2 primary purposes. One of those is it's a progress check on end of year learning goals. And then the second piece is to identify any trends that might help with instructional planning or maybe identifying curriculum gaps. Finally, let's look over to the right side now, and you can see summative. And as you look at the timeline, you see the blue dot, that's representing summative assessments. And we're just saying that, that we've got one blue dot there at the end of the year. Now, when you look at our examples, a summative assessment could be something like an end of unit test, a midterm, and certainly end of year. And for our model here, we're identifying this as that end of year assessment, right? That state summative assessment in a lot of states. But these are critical, right? Look in the middle there. These are critical for understanding performance across student subgroups, looking at growth, from year to year, and then certainly accountability. There are 2 key points that I want to make, or maybe just re-emphasize before we move on. The first is that, each assessment type has a unique purpose, but together they help to create this balanced assessment system. And the second point is, I think it's always good just to remember, right, that each assessment, it's just a snapshot in time. And if we want to get the full picture of student strengths and areas of need, we need more data points than just that one data point. Okay, we're going to do a little bit more reflection, but this time we'd like you to share out if you'd like to. And we'll use the chat feature to do the share out. So go ahead, and we've got 4 questions here. Just pick 1 or 2 of them, do a little reflection, and then we'd love to get your thoughts in the chat. So go ahead with some think time now. One other thing, I should have mentioned this. If you are choosing question 2, for example, please, when you put your thoughts in the chat, just put the number 2 and then your thoughts after that. Thank you. See number 1 interim there. Number 1 interim. 2 data points. 3, 2, 1. We're getting a good variety here. I'm assuming that you're answering question 1 and kind of telling us maybe interim, formative, summative. The chats are coming in so fast I can't keep up. I'm trying to recite some here. This is great. Being able to adapt lessons. Formative for experimenting. Check baseline progress. Ongoing, quick for the formative. Number 4, identify student areas of improvements in academic needs. 3, it's simple. That went too fast. 3, give you feedback about student understanding, help the teacher change the strategy. Awesome. Number 4, measuring student achievement, informing instructional decisions. That was for summative. Formative is continuous, allows for quick adjustments. If I had to tally up, my guess is that number 3 was coming in the most, but it went so fast. They're still coming in. This is awesome. I'm seeing a lot of 3s, but there's a lot of variety there. Number 1, it provides ongoing feedback. This is excellent. I'll just go ahead and before I pass this off to Jamie, I'll share that first of all, I love question 1. I don't know if others kind of felt the same, but if you've ever played that game, would you rather? Like, would you rather, if you could only have one food for the rest of your life, would you rather it be pizza or ice cream? That's what question 1 sort of reminds me of. So when I chose question 1, personally, as a former teacher, I would have said formative assessments. I think that, that's the type that has the potential maybe for the greatest impact. But without the other 2, I know that I would be losing a lot of important data. Certainly, it's in my mind, it's having all 3 types that work together that gives the best solution there and really helps to create the system that is most balanced, meets the most needs. This was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to hand this over now to Jamie, who's going to talk a bit more about what makes a balanced assessment system.
Thanks, Jim. All right, so before we talk about a balanced assessment system, I want to just take a step back and say that balanced assessment systems require high quality assessments. So Jim talked about formative, interim, and summative assessments. All of those pieces have to work together and be high quality in order to balance your system. And when I say high quality, I mean that the assessments are valid and reliable, that they measure what we think they're measuring, that they're measuring the standards or the learning targets, that the questions and the tests themselves have been designed with best assessment practices in mind. If you do have questions more about what high quality assessments look like and how to measure that, we can talk about that at another time. But today we're going to really focus on the assessment system as a whole and just assume that the assessments that you're using are high quality. All right, so for our system to be balanced, the 3 types of assessments need to work together. And we like to call this the 3 C's of a balanced assessment system, that they need to be comprehensive, coherent, and continuous. So we'll start with talking about how assessment systems are or should be comprehensive if they're balanced. So in order for a system to be comprehensive, we have to assess the breadth and depth of all of the standards or learning targets that we're focusing on for our students. And we have to think about different ways that we're assessing these standards. So I'm going to use the example of writing as we move through here. You can apply this to whatever your content level is. But for writing, the depth of the writing standards, the depth of our writing goals is typically that students can produce quality writing in some way, depending on their grade level and the subject, that they can produce a paragraph, a sentence, an essay, some original piece of writing. The breadth of writing standards is that there's all these little pieces that they have to do in order to get to that quality piece of writing, that they have to be able to come up with ideas about their writing. They have to be able to organize those ideas into sentences and paragraphs. They have to be able to know where to put punctuation marks, know how to spell words, and then bring all of those things together. So a comprehensive assessment system is going to not just assess those pieces, not just assess if students are able to recognize a topic sentence or able to put a period in, but it's also going to assess if students are able to take all of those pieces and bring them together at the depth that the standards are expecting. So the next part of a system is that it also needs to be coherent. So a coherent assessment system has assessments that are logically ordered and connected. These assessments are spaced across the year in a way that speak to each other and allow teachers, educators to do something with that data in order to improve student performance. So if we're thinking about the writing example, a coherent assessment system could have formative assessments that assess the pieces of the writing. So when you're teaching how to write a topic sentence, when you're teaching how to put commas in a series, you have assessments, exit tickets, activities, something that you're doing with the class, where you're able to get a gauge on how students are doing those skills. Then later on in your system, perhaps in the interim, students are asked to write an essay or to write a narrative or to do something that puts those pieces together. And then you continue that process. You have another series of instruction with formative assessments and another interim. And you maybe do 2 or 3 interims or 4 interims as you're moving towards students doing that on their summative assessment. So finally, assessment systems should also be continuous. And this means that assessment systems are supporting improvement throughout and across years. So we've talked a little bit about writing, how we can see the writing supporting improvement throughout the year, across the year. But we also want to think about how our balanced assessment system speaks to performance over multiple years. So having an assessment that we can measure and we can compare how students do from year to year, how third grade scores continue to go up, how those third graders continue to improve as fourth graders and fifth graders. Now, if we have all of these pieces in place for our balanced assessment system, we're pretty close to there, but we also want to think about 2 other things, and that's how our assessment systems can be efficient and useful. So when I talked about the comprehensiveness of an assessment system, you might have started to think about how that could be a lot of assessing. There's a lot of different pieces. There's a lot of standards, a lot of skills that you need to assess over the course of a year. And that's true. And we can think about how we can assess those skills in an efficient manner that keeps us from wasting instructional time. So thinking about how many questions, for example, we might need to have. Do we need to give students 50 different math problems to know if they know a math concept? Or do we just need to give them a few? Can we do the same thing across multiple assessments? Do we need to assess on a formative to see if kids know fractions, and then a week later look at it again on an interim? And then that they're useful. And they're useful for the various stakeholders across our school systems. So we want to think about how this balanced assessment system influences our decision-making from the micro level, where we're talking about students, teachers, parents, looking at little pieces of data, looking at how they're learning skills and concepts, all the way up to our district leaders, complex leaders who are making decisions for multiple schools and multiple areas, and how all of those people have the data they need to make decisions and improve student learning. So to summarize, a balanced assessment system is able to look at all of the different pieces of data we need in a comprehensive, coherent, and continuous manner. They are efficient, useful, and able to help make these decisions for student learning. So in a minute, we're going to start an exercise that's going to help you look at your assessment system. But before we do that, I want you to just kind of take a minute and reflect and do a quick gut check and think about your school, whatever level you're at. Think from your perspective, whether you're more at the micro level as a parent or a teacher, or more at the macro level overseeing a complex or school area. Where do you think your assessment system currently lies? And I am going to launch a poll. Give me just a moment. Okay. All right, you should see a poll popping up on your screen, and I'd love you to just take a moment and answer. Where do you think your assessment system, your school's assessment system is? Are you following all of the C's? You're completely balanced? Do you have some of the components, but maybe not others? Or are you thinking that you are lacking in quite a few categories? I'm going to give you a moment to answer this, and then I will end the poll and display the results. And I'm seeing responses start to slow down, so I'm going to go ahead and post it. It looks like we have, hopefully you can see the results on your screen now. It looks like we have answers in all three categories. A lot of people are saying they're somewhat balanced, that their system is doing some of the things that it needs to be doing, but there's some areas that could use some improvement. That we have a few people that are saying their system is completely balanced, really following all those three C's. And then some people saying that their system is quite unbalanced, that they're missing some components. All right, now we're going to walk through an activity that's going to help you really reflect on that system and think about where your system lies. So I think I saw this assessment tool was dropped in the chat earlier, but I'm going to ask if Amy can go ahead and drop it again. You're going to see a link come up to a PDF, and next to that PDF, you're going to be able to click the three dots or just click directly on the PDF, excuse me, and that should download and open on your computer. And it's going to open in a fillable format that you're going to be able to go ahead and type directly into that PDF. And I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to fill out this PDF and think about your assessment system. So before we start, I just want to say that, first of all, I know that you're not going to have all of this data off the top of your head from all perspectives. I want you to think about your perspective, where you currently lie in that school system. If you're a teacher, you can think about your classroom, your subject. If you're a principal or a district leader or an area leader, you may want to focus in on a certain area, a certain grade level, a certain content area, even a certain cluster like middle school or high school grades, whatever makes the most sense to really think through this the best that you can. Don't worry about getting this 100% right. We're going to tell you at the end, we're going to ask you to go out and collect more data on this. Today, we're just going to start the process of reflecting. All right, so in this, it walks you through thinking about your formative, interim, and standard assessments, and summative assessments, thinking about the purposes of the assessments, how you're using the data to those assessments. In that first row, one part that I want you to notice is that it asks for the names and purposes of the assessments. And I know that not all of your assessments are going to have a particular name. You know, you might be giving exit tickets, different assignments for formative. The reason we have the names there is so when you go ahead and compare this tool with other people from your school, you know what you're speaking about and you're able to speak to the same things. So, for example, I live in Maryland, and Maryland gives the MCAT as a summative tool, but some grade levels also take the SAT. So I would have two summatives that I would be writing about in the system. And I want to make sure that I know which one I'm talking about if I was to look at a colleague's worksheet. All right, so I'm going to turn off my camera. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I will come back when there is 1 minute remaining. Go ahead and jot down some notes and some information about your assessment system just in the first table. Don't go on to the reflection section yet. We will get there in a moment. All right, I will be back in 5 minutes. I don't want to interrupt, but I see some people asking for the PDF. It is in the chat. You should be able to click on it. Amy Schenk has posted it. And if you click right there, it should come up for you. For those of you who are already working, please keep doing so. I see some people in the chat saying that there's not a PDF to access. It is in the chat. Amy Schenk has posted it a few times. However, if you're still struggling to download it, we will get it to you later. For now, you can just go ahead and make some notes about your assessment. The questions just ask you to post the name and purpose of the assessments, when you give them, how you get the results, and what you do with the results. So if you can just go ahead and type some of that information down, write it on a piece of paper next to you, and we will get this PDF to you at a later time. Just giving a time check. We have 1 minute left. If you've already filled out your tool, just give us 1 moment. If you're still working, we'll come back together in about 1 minute. All right. Thank you to everyone for taking the time to reflect on your assessment system. And I know that some of you were unable to access the PDF. That's okay. Just make sure you're writing down your thoughts and ideas somewhere. We will make sure we get you this form, and you can continue to take some time to reflect on it. For now, if while you were reflecting on your assessments, you had anything that you would like to share, anything you noticed about your system, your assessments, you can go ahead and drop it in the chat, and I'll give you a moment to do that. I'm seeing people talk about how they're using their formative assessments to check performance and achievement along the way, and the summative to wrap up the end of the school year and the achievement at the end. Drawing terms can be ongoing across the school year. All right, I'm going to invite Jim to join us back on camera, and he's going to take you through the next part of this exercise.
Thank you, Jamie. Okay, so the exercise that you just did, and if you didn't get a chance to do that, don't worry too much. We will make sure that you get that PDF. We'll get you this this tool. Sorry, one second. Okay. So like I was saying, we'll make sure that you get the PDF. You'll get this tool, so don't worry about that. And if you didn't get a ton of time to reflect on, the different assessments that you're doing in your own school or district, that's okay. We're going to encourage you to do that. You need to spend some more time than just the 5 minutes we were giving you anyway. We were just trying to give you a little jump start there. What would you do next, though, right? So let's just say that you did have some time. You filled out some of this information about your formatives, interims, and summatives. What would a next step be? Well, the next step is really the first of several hard steps, I would say. It's really to sit back and think, right? You need to look at your documentation and think about what it's telling you. And then hopefully to have some discussions with other people at your school or district and consider if there are any changes that you want to make. Now, we're going to use the example that you see on my screen. So for now, if you were doing some documentation, I'll just ask you to kind of set that aside and focus here on this example, just so that we can all work through this together. When you do this kind of an exercise, you're going to want to look at each assessment type, right? Look at the formative, go through those questions, look at the interim, same, summative, and do the same thing. But then it's really important to take a step back and look at the big picture, look at the full picture. That's going to help you see how balanced your assessment system is. But let's go ahead and let's start with this formative column. What I want you to do is just imagine that you're working with a colleague and that this was the data. I'm going to do a little click. This was the data that they shared with you about their assessment system. I want you to think about what the conversation you might have with them, what would that sound like, right? What might you put in the notice and wonder section down below? Would love to hear your thoughts. Please feel free to use the chat. Take a moment to read and give us your thoughts, please. Bailey Howe. Good. It's generic. And they redo the quiz. That's what makes it formative. Students offered multiple ways. Formative should not only be quizzes. How long are the quizzes? How are they aligned to the standards? Not enough detail on when and how. Grading the quiz is not necessarily after grade the quizzes, results after. It's difficult for a teacher to make a quiz daily grading. Too much. Formative can be student-to-student checks, diagnostic test. Lots of good thoughts coming in. Thank you. Please keep them coming in. I'm going to go ahead and kind of summarize a few things that I've been reading, but also just some other thoughts that if this was my colleague, I might have this sort of conversation with them. I know that they're still coming in. This is excellent. Keep them coming, please. Self-assessments may help them reflect on their answers, asking oral questions, daily formative assessment, weekly quizzes. Thank you. This is great. Exit tickets, make them fun. Thank you. Yeah, so I think if you're looking at the screen too, I tried to summarize a few points, which most of you've already kind of hit on these, right? You might have a conversation about, are there other formatives that you've thought about using? For example, centers and exit tickets, that was mentioned there. Certainly in the last box, it's blank. How are you using data from the quizzes, right? It's interesting, like if this was what this person, the educator had indicated, they've got the purpose as monitoring learning, right, and adjusting instruction, but they don't reflect or they don't have any reflection in terms of how they're using the data. So you definitely would want to talk about that. Tools like Phuket. Good, thank you. Yeah, and I know the fourth summary point there that you see on the screen, student ownership. I know I saw that comment kind of come through, right? Having students do self-reflection on their strengths and their areas of need. That's a critical part of formative assessment. Checklists are useful. Parking lot strategy with sticky notes. This is great, really great ideas. Thank you. I'm going to have us move now to the interim section. So take a look at the screen, and same thing. If this is what you saw, what might you talk about with your colleague? Yeah, this is great. We have a lot of different comments coming in here. They enable educators regarding assessing teaching and learning. What changes are made based upon these results? Students' level of mastery of the standards. Yeah, so I think I saw the comment in there, right? If you look at the very top there, it says district interims to evaluate students' learning, right? So a conversation might sound something like, you're absolutely right, 100%. They are used to evaluate student learning and progress, but they can also be used to identify trends, right? Trends that might identify different gaps in the curriculum, trends that could also inform if there is some support that needs to happen right now for groups of students. One thing too, and I'm not sure if I saw it in there, but when you're looking at the data, right, in particular with interims, I think this is very useful, would be to try to find the key strengths, right? Where is there an area that maybe a teacher or a group of teachers are really knocking it out of the park? A lot of times we're always looking for those areas of need, but it's also important to look at the areas of strength, because maybe there's something there. If you do a little investigation, there's something there that someone's doing very well, and you can then replicate that in other areas, in other subject areas, even within a particular class. Okay, let's look at one more. I'm going to keep us moving along. Let's take a look at the summative column now. And if this was the data that was brought to you, what might the conversation sound like with your colleague? You use this data in the student progress thought to school. Seems high stakes. Yeah, I can see, some people are putting in that, you're doing these more than once a year. Yeah, so that'll be different, right? Across different schools and districts and even states, you're going to see different things, people doing things maybe a little bit differently. Use data to check and balance the things you're doing at the beginning of the year. Quarterly exams. Good, thank you. This is great. Thank you for your thoughts here. I'm going to just sort of summarize, wrap up a little bit here, and then I'm going to pass it to Jamie in just a moment. But when you look at this right here, right, if this was the data that the teacher brought to you or the educator brought to you, you might start just by talking about the value of the data that you get from a summative assessment, right? Certainly it's parents would use this kind of data to support their kids. Educators can look for gaps in areas of weakness that would it be to improve curriculum and instruction. And certainly school leaders would want to identify needs within and across schools that could help inform and allocate resources. Now, before I pass this on to Jamie, I want to say that there's a lot of different ways that you can do this kind of exercise and use this tool. But what I would say is a fairly standard way of using this tool would be to get a small team of educators in your school or district, and each to go through this, right? Fill out the forms, and then step back, look at what you guys see, have some discussion, and then think about if there are any changes that you want to make to getting your system to be more balanced. Just given the webinar structure and the number of people that we have on the webinar, we couldn't make that happen exactly, but hopefully that made sense what I was saying. Okay, I'm going to pass this now to Jamie.
Thanks, Jim. So we're going to take a moment just with what you've filled out so far and start to look at evidence of how your system is continuous, coherent, and comprehensive, excuse me. And as Jim said, this is just a starting place. Really a great next step would be to think about your school system as a whole, meet with other teachers, meet with other district leaders, meet with other people from across your system at different levels and different parts of your system to see how these things all play together and how your system can be improved. But for today, let's take a look at what you know about your system and start with looking at how your system is comprehensive. So I'm going to put some questions up here, and I want you to take a moment and look at what you've written down about your system and reflect on how comprehensive your system is based on what you know from your perspective. Are students being able to assess, show their learning on multiple standards, on all of the standards in different ways? Are we getting the right data? And remembering that we have various stakeholders looking at this data and making different decisions based on the data. We have teachers making decisions on what to do in the classroom tomorrow and next week. We have district leaders, complex leaders looking at the data and deciding what to do next year and years beyond. So we want to make sure that we're getting all of those pieces for all of the people that need them, and that we're being efficient and getting it in the ways that are best for student learning and that give up the least amount of instructional time to assessment. All right, so we're also going to look at how student learning can be coherent. So are any of your assessments disconnected from their learning goals? What are your primary learning goals and standards? Are you noticing on your list any assessments that really don't speak to those at all? Are your assessments in a flow and in a progress that makes sense? Are you able to take the time from one assessment to another to use the information that you're getting in order to improve student instruction? And speaking to that efficient piece too, are there any redundancies? Do you have multiple assessments that are really assessing the same thing? If you're doing it in order to test it, improve instruction, test it again, that's one thing, and that's important for a balanced assessment system. But if you're just testing it over and over again without the right time to really implement that data, then you want to think about how you might remove those redundancies in assessment. All right, and finally, how continuous is your system? Are you monitoring learning on a regular, daily basis, whatever that looks like for you and your subject? Some subjects move faster than others. Some subjects you may want to take data at different intervals, but is there some kind of reasoning for how that data is being taken? And are you or someone in your system using that data across years? Are you looking at how your school is performing, your district is performing as a whole, not just this year, but next year, last year, and across years? All right. So we are going to go back to a couple of polls. And earlier on, I asked you to think about your system. So now, after you've completed this exercise, I want you to think about it again. After doing the audit, how would you rate your system now? The poll should be popping up on your screen. Go ahead and answer where your thoughts are now. Are you still thinking your system's balanced? Not quite, somewhat balanced, or a lot of areas that still need improvement? And I'll give you a few more seconds to answer before I go ahead and present this data to everyone. Okay, looks like we had similar results as last time. I'm seeing a little bit less in the somewhat balanced, moving more to the completely balanced and unbalanced, but that's just my remembering and not based on actual numbers. So let's go ahead and do another poll. And I'm going to ask you now to think about how your answers changed. All right. So you should be seeing this poll pop up now on your screen. Did your rating change when you went through the exercise? Did you already know what you were going to get? And you're like, oh, yeah, looking at the data really confirmed what I knew. Did it help clarify your thinking? You thought maybe you knew, but this audit tool brought out some more ideas. Or did you realize through your audit, wow, I really thought my assessment system was in one area, but it was actually in another? All right, I'm going to go ahead and share these now. Looks like for most of us, we had some idea of where our assessment system was. Either this audit, helped confirm what you knew or clarified what you thought. But some people really realized that their assessment system maybe was better balanced or less balanced than what they initially thought. All right, thanks for participating in those with me. I'm going to turn it back to Jim now.
Thank you, Jamie. Okay, we're close to wrapping up here. We wanted to just end with a few questions to think about. And feel free, again, we'd love to get your thoughts in the chat. So the first two questions: what benefits do you see from analyzing your assessment system? And how might this analysis support student learning and growth? Fine-tune performance, identify and remove redundancies, identify strengths and weaknesses of student performance, helps with instructional groupings, identify themes, student gaps, identifying a path to improvement, PD, yeah, keep them coming. I'm going to move us just because we only have 3 minutes, but right. So hopefully you see some benefit in terms of taking stock of your system and just gaining that awareness, right? Awareness of the types of assessments being used, when they're being used, how many, and then the data piece, right? When is data received and how is it being used? And then, when you do that, when you take stock and hopefully then you have conversations with others, you're thinking about how to make your system more balanced. That can happen in a lot of different ways. Some people have already mentioned things like removing redundancies. You might notice that there's a gap in how people are using data. And so you might form data teams within your school or district to analyze assessment data, look for those trends and things like that. How about this question? What support do educators need to understand the components of a balanced assessment system and how it impacts learning across the year and decision-making in their role? Time to train and plan, PL. Maximize learning time, scheduling of assessments. More about designing balanced assessments. Excellent. I'm going to move us. These are really great thoughts. Thank you for sharing, but I'm going to move us just because we have a minute or less than a minute. I'm going to just kind of end with, this is obviously just a starting point, but it is meant to be a tool that would help you on your way to a more balanced assessment system. If you're thinking about a next step, it might simply be to bring this tool back to your school or district and do this exercise together. I'm going to pass it on to Matt now.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you all for joining us today. We hope you found great value out of this session. Again, as Jim and Jamie had mentioned, we're definitely not going to solve the world's problems in 1 hour, but we do hope this provided you with a great jumping off point on evaluating your own assessment system. Please don't hesitate to reach out at any point. I am going to include the URL for our assessment website that you can visit. And then please also know that you can reach out to me at any time with any questions that you have. I'm going to put my email in the chat as well. But again, really appreciate everybody's time today. You will receive the recording, the PDF of the presentation, as well as the assessment audit tool. And again, we encourage you to reach out with any questions, thoughts, anything at all. We're always happy to help. Thank you all very much.